Today, I see everybody flooding the doorway here right at the half hour. So wait for a moment for people to arrive and settle. Everyone should have such a loving dog, Suzanne. Okay, we'll enjoy the sound of the bell as it invites us to sit together in zazen. Is it possible to sit together in this way without engaging too much commentary? The commentary like fidgeting or following our lines of thinking, which will be there, or being too enraptured by whatever physical sensations or feelings that flow through each moment. Noticing the longing, for things to be otherwise, the shapes and flavors of those longings, and clinging to something we want to save or push away that which we prefer not to experience, and that deep well of ignoring everything else, or just using it as a background for our next story to maintain the self-centered dream. Can we sit and watch all the comments without more commentary? Just watching, just listening, just feeling. And then, of course, there's the breathing. Such a simple, automatic, embodied practice of life and death. The inhalation, taking in life, lifting us a bit, opening us a bit, and the release of the exhalation, letting go. Maybe it's not the last one, but one day it will be. Life and death in every moment, not too encumbered by too much commentary. This is our sitting. This is Buddha's body and mind and heart. Something so profoundly simple, just sitting. And yet we begin to discover it as the gateway to everything. When we very gently step out of the way. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Wonderful to see all of you as always. And I want to check something before I kind of launch in just a little bit. I see that Ryan, you're here. Friend Mike, yeah. Um, can you be unmuted? Ed, is that okay? You see Ryan? He can raise his hand. Here we go.
Got it.
Hi there.
Hello.
I wasn't sure you'd be here because often you can't come, but here you are. And I was just going to say I was going to kind of lay out what I was going to talk about today, and including three of your poems.
Oh, okay.
And here you are. Um, so two of them are some of the small ones that you wrote when you were here. All of them are ones you wrote when you were here.
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't know if you wanted to read them, you want me to read them to you. Um, we can do it either way. But there's the one
Hmm.
that you do in response to the prisoners and the keys of
Hmm.
Hafiz.
Yeah,
That's at the end, and I would like to read the Hafiz part, and you read your part in that one. Is that okay?
absolutely. Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm open on the other two.
Okay.
Um,
I'll tell you what they are, so you can bring them up. So I don't have to screen share them. 1 second. Open eyes, open heart, and vast heart,
hmm.
and then hope renewed. So that's okay.
Yep, I'm pulling them up now.
Okay. Great. We will go forward then.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. I was going to read them, and I thought, well, when it comes time, you can remute yourself now, but we'll it'd be nice to hear the poet's voice.
Okay.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't know, Ryan is in the Twin Cities. He and Emily and some other folks helped initially invite and cultivate the Song of the Awakening Together Song of Air that began as the Minnesota Trauma Project, or out of that. And um, I began to go and teach there, and it's one of our families of sanghas here. So here's the practice question of the day. Does it feel like your head is about to explode? Facing all the difficulties and all the things that are swirling around us these days, sometimes it seems like a bit much. So I have a story to tell you, which I hope, an old Buddhist story, which I think will be instructive, and it's kind of delightful in a certain way. And then I have some science to offer you. We have Ryan's poetry and a koan. So you know me, I always give you too much, but they're all woven together. So it's my mind and you're my students. So your mind sort of becomes that way, hopefully. So that's kind of the lay of the land. But let's be more gentle. And Ryan will begin with Open eyes, open heart. So it's a brief poem, and I'll make a comment about it.
You just want me to read the poem now?
Yeah, the open eyes, open heart one, small.
Okay. Open eyes, open heart. To see the world with eyes wide open is to accept a life of brokenheartedness. For in opening our eyes to see the world as it is, we cannot help but open our hearts as well.
Do you remember when you wrote it?
I think it was midway through the retreat.
Hmm. Any prompt that caused you to write that one?
I feel like there was something that was happening in the sort of either the political scene or something within Israel and Gaza. Um, and sort of seeing the news in the midst of being in a retreat setting and sort of having this experience of sort of, sort of being cloistered in a retreat environment. And then also having this sort of awareness of like, oh yeah, there's also this other world outside of this retreat environment in which all these things are continuing to happen. Um, and the tenderizing effect of, I guess, turning outward from the retreat center to look and see again what's happening.
So read it again.
Mhm.
Now that people hear that.
Open eyes, open heart. To see the world with eyes wide open is to accept a life of brokenheartedness. For in opening our eyes to see the world as it is, we cannot help but open our hearts as well.
Thank you. To see the world is to accept a life of brokenheartedness. And opening our eyes suggests that it's possible that our heart might open also. So this is, in his words, the tenderizing effect also of this thing about our head about to explode. But here's a story. I want to tell you an old story, old Buddhist story about Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And I'm using the Indian word. In China, of course, that Bodhisattva is named Kuan Yin. And in Japan, it's Kanzeon or Kanon. Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit means the one who hears the cries of the world. Similar to this poem that Ryan was offering us. And remember that the bodhisattvas are all archetypes. They're not like some special celestial being or something or saint. It's a part of us. And that we can come to realize these aspects of ourselves through practice. Um, and a bodhisattva, of course, lives with a vow for the benefit of all beings. In this case, Avalokiteshvara is the bodhisattva of compassion. And throughout Buddhist iconography, sometimes that bodhisattva is seen as a female quality, but sometimes as a male. So I say this is the first trans bodhisattva from way back when. And so when I tell the story, I'm going to use the gender they, because to say he or she would not be quite complete. So here's how the story begins. It was hard for Avalokiteshvara at first. Even though they practiced steadily and diligently, it was still a bit overwhelming when they finally came to the max compassion skill level test, like the graduate level exams of compassion training. There were so many challenges calling for their attention. They didn't even know where to begin, what to do, or how to hold it all. They saw so much suffering everywhere they turned, and they wanted to help so much, but felt it was all overwhelming. Finally, it was just too much. And at that point, their head completely exploded. You might know this feeling. I'm going to take a pause in the story. So we're all, I'm sure, most of us are aware more than ever that because of the real-time access to information we have from all over the world, all the time, 24 hours a day, we know that unlike people in the past who didn't know this quite so intimately, we know that billions of people on the face of the earth can't count on basics of life, of being protected, having food. That whole species are exiting the planet, maybe even ours, at some point. And that our home planet is just a small, delicately balanced object in the midst of the, unfathomable, inconceivable cosmos. And this big view gives us at least a headache, if not our head exploding. But if we bring it closer to home, right now, at this moment, what surrounds you? Right where you are, literally. I'm looking out a window in front of me that's past my laptop screen. And all I can see through this window are some trees and the early morning sunshine. It's really early here, not quite 8 o'clock in the morning. There are birds that pass by every once in a while, and even a butterfly I saw. There's a little bit of water from last night's rain that's dripping down from the eaves. Um, and the bees that have taken up residence in the wall right here, I can see them going in and out outside through the window, doing their daily tasks. And way in the distance, I can get a glimpse of the ocean and a few clouds in a otherwise um, in a blue summer sky. So that's my local view. And even as I describe it, I don't know if you can feel your body change. Mine has from that bigger, more challenging view. But when I attempt to open back up to the larger view again, what happens? It feels like my head's going to explode. All I have to do is just start looking at the news. And I know that I'm not alone in this. And for most of us who cling to the comfortable life preserver of a fairly good, stable, and even privileged life, I mean, compared to most of the world, it's a real shock to find ourselves kind of adrift in the sort of dire straits of distress and all these reversals of all sorts. And the dissonance is increasingly tough to take. It's like a vibration that's increasing. And this is what Avalokiteshvara encountered. So I wanted us to know that this is not just an old story. This is what we're experiencing. So I'll go back to the story now. Avalokiteshvara's training had this trouble, head exploded. But fortunately, Avalokiteshvara had a buddy who had been there with them all the while and understood what's needed when heads explode. This is a good thing to have. The name of the Buddha buddy was Amitabha. Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light, or sometimes translated the Buddha of infinite life. This is the Buddha that some sects of Buddhism chant to be reborn in the Pure Land, Amitabha. But Amitabha got it right. It got right to work, really, to make a superpower out of what looked like a disability for Avalokiteshvara, this exploding thing. So Amitabha patched up Avalokiteshvara, and instead of trying to put it all back together, he gave him 10 heads because one couldn't hold it. And then put an 11th head on top to remind them that Amitabha, the friend of infinite light and life, was always there with them, like a good and steady friend. And I would think, that should handle it, right? But no, because with all the heads, Avalokiteshvara could see more clearly and think more fully about what needed attention. But they were still going to have to act in some way and respond to the world. perceiving all of these difficulties. So Amitabha went ahead and gave him 1,000 arms and 1,000 hands and an eye or a tool in each one of them. Apparently, it helps to see what you're doing when you're out there meeting suffering and embodying compassion all over the place. So for those of you that are familiar, this won't be a surprise, but I want to just screen share a couple things. Very quickly. Okay, this is an ancient statue of Avalokiteshvara. And many of you have seen things like this. And you can see it represents some of the things I'm talking about. In Tibetan tankas, you'll see images like this. You see there's Amitabha up there and all the different Buddhas, and these are all the hands, and these are all the heads. So I just wanted to make sure you knew I wasn't making this stuff up. Although somebody made it up at some point to make a point, a very important point. Because the challenges of our lives are equally direct and personally felt, just like in this archetypal story. And in this game, there aren't any like small problems or big problems, because this is not a comparison game. It's not a game at all. All suffering is suffering. All suffering is suffering. But we also know from the teachings that suffering doesn't stand in opposition to joy. That's one of the challenging things. And a part that's easy to miss. And this is where the story is leading us. Because in most of us, I was in a meeting yesterday with about a dozen teachers, Zen teachers, all of whom are older or retiring or just been around a long, long time, kind of my generation of teachers and older. And we were all talking about what brought us to practice in the first place and why we were still practicing. And I know for a lot of us, there's kind of a naive exuberance at practice in the beginning, as if we're going to overcome suffering or dominate it, and if we do so, we'll finally get to joy. But the mind of domination and overcoming something and wiping things out is actually part of the suffering problem. That's not the solution. It comes out of the same kind of seeds of discord that we're seeing all around us all the time now, of domination and overcoming, wiping things out. And it's enough to make your head explode. And it ends up sowing more seeds of suffering in the process. There's a quote that I've mentioned before. Soen Roshi was an interesting first generation teacher from Japan. Someone asked him one time, "I'm so discouraged. What do I do?" And he said, "Encourage others." Encourage others, which is one part of the issue. Turn towards service rather than always focusing on yourself. So we've had this initial poem about looking clearly. We have the story about Avalokiteshvara's head exploding. So now here's a little bit of science. And for those of you in Austin, it'll be really interesting. There's a scientist, Ilya Prigogine, you don't need to remember the name or anything, who was born in Russia in 1917, but he became a professor of physics and chemical engineering at the University of Texas in Austin. And in 1967, he was a long time ago, he founded the Center for Studies of Statistical Mechanics and Complex Systems. And that it continues. It's called the Center for Complex Quantum Systems. He was an interesting guy because he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1977 for his contributions to non-equilibrium thermodynamics, just part of our Dharma here. No, especially something called the theory of dissipative structures. Now, these are a bunch of fancy scientific words, but now here's my version. This is the theory of dissipative structures for Dharma people. Okay, ready? And I know he'd be turning over in his grave, but this is the best I can do. This says, if there's a system, maybe it's a cluster of molecules, maybe it's a chemical reaction, maybe it's a community, maybe it's a person's body, any system that's living and holding together and operating. Energy comes into it, it's taking in energy, it's alive. Remember thermodynamics, and it dissipates that energy. Energy comes out. If more energy comes into that system than it's equipped to handle, it starts vibrating. It can't dissipate the energy. The structure can't hold it. And two things can happen. It either explodes, breaks down, is destroyed by it, or it suddenly reorganizes to a bigger system which can hold more energy. When Joko said, you're doing the right practice if you can be a larger container for life energy. This is what she's talking about. I'm just using a little scientific analogy for it. Energy in, energy out. It dissipates the energy. Avalokiteshvara's head couldn't handle it, so boom, 1,000 arms, 10 heads. Suddenly, it's a larger container for life. Something more happened, not by pushing anything away, but by liberation through transformation. So Ryan, you're up again with vast heart. You could probably hear this one coming.
Vast heart. Sometimes when the universe pours into us, the rapid expansion is too much to bear. The container shatters from the force of so much love, life, vitality. Pause in that place of brokenness. Observe the falling away of certainty. Don't try to rebuild the container too quickly. Increased capacity develops over time. Caught in the compassionate collective, slowly the shape of a new container takes form, the heart finding strength once again, enlarging to hold the vastness.
And so I hadn't offered any of these teachings I'm talking about today before you wrote that poem, had I?
No.
It's interesting. Yeah, the same thing coming through. Exactly the same thing coming through. This reordering, becoming a larger vessel, uh, is really what's happening. And it's so strange that it happens by us essentially sitting and doing not much together. So Avalokiteshvara wanted to meet suffering. Amitabha helped them become this larger container and reorganize so that we could meet suffering, dukkha. And remember, just a little reflection, when the Buddha called these the Four Noble Truths, the first one was dukkha. Um, I don't, I'm not sure that I like Four Realities a little better, but the Buddha didn't say this is the first truth, dukkha, which we will quickly dispense with because we can solve it. No, he said this is the noble truth of dukkha. Suffering is noble, the first reality, the fountainhead of Dharma is right here. You can't get around it. You can't get over it. You can't get past it. You can't get through it. It's the actuality of our lives, and meeting it in this way is noble. Just like these two poems have suggested, just like this ancient story has suggested. So suffering is something that asks something of us. Like last week when I was quoting those lines from the David Whyte poem, request to stop doing what we're doing and to stop becoming what we're doing while we become it. This is our Zazen practice. It's asking something of us. It's an invitation. Questions that can make or unmake a life. Questions that have patiently waited for you. Questions that have no right to go away. Other lines from that poem. Asking us to stop, in some ways, stop trying to hold it together and let ourselves be transformed into something larger. Well, before I wrap up, here's the koan I promised. The Hands and Eyes of Great Compassion. It's so important that it shows up in three different collections: in the Shobogenzo, Case 105, Book of Serenity, Case 54, Blue Cliff Record 89. These are geeky details that I do, but you don't have to remember it. But here's the conversation between two old friends, which how koans usually work. Yunyan asked Daowu, these guys are Dharma brothers. Yunyan asked Daowu, how does the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, these are Chinese guys, why do they have so many hands and eyes? And Daowu answered, it's like someone in the middle of the night reaching behind their head to adjust their pillow. And Yunyan says, I understand, just like you did, right? And Daowu asked, what is it that you understand? And Yunyan said, the body is covered with hands and eyes. And Daowu said, that's pretty good, but it's only about 8/10 of the answer. And so Yunyan says, okay, what would you say? And Daowu said, the body is nothing but hands and eyes. Or one translation, throughout the body are hands and eyes. So these two brothers, who both become renowned masters over time, this is in the first half of the 9th century, they went through a lot of difficulty. It was not a great time in China. And when asked this question about why are all these hands and eyes, and Daowu responds, it's like somebody sleeping in the night reaching for their pillow. He doesn't say this is the function. He's saying this thing, the compassion, is natural. It's as natural as reaching for your pillow in the night, which does not require you to think of anything or to actually see anything or to understand anything. It's natural. And Yunyan said, our bodies are covered with hands and eyes, like we have a lot of capacity. And Daowu says, we are nothing but this capacity. We're nothing but compassion. There's an interesting story. It was another side story that Isan Dorsey, who was a Zen priest in San Francisco right as the AIDS epidemic hit, and he had a little zendo in the Castro. So he was at ground zero during all of this. And he started the first hospice there, the Maitri Hospice. And when asked about this koan and about compassion, he said, well, you can reach for your pillow, but maybe it's best to just fluff the pillow over a friend who's in pain and can't reach behind him to do it for themselves, to wipe their brow, to help them with a cold glass of water, to cook them chocolate chip cookies. This seems to clear out the webs of our notions of great compassion. Be yourself. Keep it simple, because we forget the reality of our true nature. But we have possibilities all around us all the time, just like these two brothers, just like us. And in the poem, Hope Renewed, and if you'll get Ryan unmuted while I do my part, there was a small poem by Hafiz, who was a contemporary of Rumi and that spirit of ecstatic poet. This is his poem, Dropping Keys. I'm going to read it twice, and I'm going to shift the gender. And then Ryan wrote another piece to follow it. Dropping Keys. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. The small woman builds cages for everyone she knows, while the sage, who has to duck her head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. Such a beautiful turn. And in response to this, Ryan wrote Hope Renewed, including them.
Sometimes when I get discouraged at the state of the world and the rampant displays of cruelty, I think of a teacher traveling from place to place, softening barriers to love at each stop, leaving behind communities of open hearts and clearing minds. Knowing that there are pockets of people for whom awakening is their primary commitment and kindness is their primary expression, breathes new life into hope and revitalizes my engagement to continuing on this path.
And may we continue to encourage each other, as your poems do, as these stories do, as Soen Roshi suggested. And thank you for the kind nod also in that reflection. So let's hear from others. You listened to me a lot and heard some things from Ryan. Once again, practice, not politics. What the edge of your practice that this calls forward, so that your head doesn't just explode, but reorders itself into something more of a gift in the universe. I hope I don't just confuse you. But Kathy?
I know. I don't feel confused. I feel incredibly nurtured, really. Yeah. And what I have is a request. I was wondering if Ryan could read his poem Vast Heart one more time.
I would imagine he can.
Thank you.
Or I can read it to you if you
Okay.
only because it's just simpler. And
Right.
I have it here. Vast Heart by Ryan. Sometimes when the universe pours into us, the rapid expansion is too much to bear. Container shatters from the force of so much love, life, vitality. Pause in that place of brokenness. Observe the falling away of certainty. Don't try to rebuild the container too quickly. Increased capacity develops over time. Caught in the compassionate collective. Caught in the compassionate collective. Slowly, the shape of a new container takes form. The heart finding strength once again, enlarging to hold the vastness.
It's just so apt. I don't have the words for it, right? It catches.
The poem is enough.
Yeah, it's life. It's really life. But that the line about the community, you repeated it.
Yeah, caught in the compassionate collective.
Yeah, the compassionate collective. Yeah, that that to me is what saves everything, honestly.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to put that into words.
I thought it was important in the story that Avalokiteshvara didn't transform themselves in some single heroic way. They required a friend.
I love it. I know it's true.
You have to have a friend.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's there also.
Right. Thank you so much.
You, Kathy. Brahman?
Thank you. I was wondering if you could post those poems. That last one especially is so many people can relate to, and it's exactly where the Hui is right now. It's where I am right now.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It would be nice to take some time with it and read it line by line. So
Let me ask a question. I'll just look at Ryan. Is it okay if we post these? He's thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay. We'll
Great.
put them when the inquiry post, I'll give them to Cassie and she can include them with the recording like she often does.
Great. The other thing is, it was funny, the part of me that was hesitating sharing this, but I'm going to put that on my lap. I'd say about had to have been 50 years ago. Perhaps my head had exploded, I don't know. But all of a sudden, I felt myself sitting, and I have my leg propped up right now, so I can't really do it. Sitting in this chair, and my arms are out, and my legs are slightly spread, sitting, because there are all these little parts sitting in my lap. Amazing. I mean, as I looked down, this is before I knew about parts and Buddhist anything, or Hindu or whatever, but they were all my kids, and there were people I didn't like, and they were all of these, and I could feel myself in this, and it wasn't me, it was me and it wasn't me, but it was, I felt the embodiment of whatever the it is.
Mhm.
I could physically feel it. I had the vision, but I could look down and I could see all these parts. And it was such a relief to welcome everything in that moment.
Uh-huh.
And be able to remember that feeling and that vision and see what a help that is in life, to be able to experience that.
To welcome everything.
Yeah. And to be able to see it, because I could see my kids, I could see the people I didn't like, I could feel everything. And as I did that, I smiled and laughed and laughed. It was such a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's it.
the very first small poem, Open Eyes, Open Heart, where Ryan read, to see the world with eyes wide open is to accept a life of brokenheartedness, for in opening our eyes to see the world as it is, we cannot help but open our hearts as well.
Yeah.
And so that opening was right there.
Yeah. That's all.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Robin, got it.
Thank you for the reminder of the larger container. What brought me to practice was Hurricane Katrina, not the hurricane, but the disaster of the hurricane relief work that I did. And since then, there have been a lot of disasters, more personal ones than large ones affecting me personally. And though the large ones affect me personally too. And it's easy in the midst of grief to forget about the larger container.
Mhm.
And I've experienced that before. It's really hard to remember right now.
Yeah.
So I went to Barton Springs, where the large container lives here in Austin. And I have very little capacity lately to let in the beauty. But Barton Springs is so overwhelmingly beautiful, whether it's beautiful, scantily clad bodies or beauty of the water or the sky or just the whole vibe, the coldness of the water. A little bit got in. So keep trusting that the container is bigger.
And it's always with you, even when you feel small.
Yeah.
And broken.
Yes.
And part of the crushing grief is when you know that someone you loved couldn't remember that and chose to exit. Yeah.
And I know you've experienced that loss too. So thank you I'm benefiting from your own grief, I realize.
Yeah, it's very, there's a, well, I'll just say more. It keeps
Thank you.
working on you. It doesn't get finished. It keeps working on you. Mhm. There's another side of this wild view that I'm asking you to embody today. Um, and I know I'm going to offer something else here, but it just, I couldn't help myself. I didn't expect to offer it, but it's a very small poem translated by Jane Hirschfield. And some of you know Jane Hirschfield's work. But she also translated some things. And this is from a mystic, a Christian mystic she was a Dutch. And I can't remember when it was, a long time ago. Hafiz to Broadbelt or something. I can't say it. Anyway, listen to her. This is Jane Hirschfield's translation of her expression. This is the other side. All things are too small to hold me. I am so vast in the infinite. I reach for the uncreated. I've touched it. It undoes me, wider than wide. Everything else is too narrow. You know this well. You who are also there. So this is the other side of practice, where having opened, a little bit like Ron was talking about, or some of the things we've spoken about, we're opened, and then you realize it's not that you're just this broken thing being held, you are also the vastness. And that they move together. All things are too small to hold me. I'm so vast in the infinite. I reach for the uncreated. I've touched it. It undoes me, wider than wide. Everything else is too narrow. You know this well, you who are also there. We'll have to post that one too, Rowan. And our practice path and the principles in which we can come into a real embodied everyday relationship with this, like what we've just spoken about, Robin spoke about, and I spoke about, and looking out the window here. We say, as we chant the four practice principles, together, caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Ryan, for your offerings and your willingness to participate as you have so generously today. And for everyone's questions, which are the real teachings. Thank you. Ed?
Much gratitude for everybody for being here today, as Flint just said. And just a gentle reminder that Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. So know your support makes a huge, huge difference. And there is a link on the website where you can contribute, and that's at appamada.org/contribute. And if you'd like to stay here and continue for another 30 minutes, just pop yourself into gallery view. I like saying that. Just pop yourself into gallery view, and we'll be here for another 30 minutes. Everybody is invited to stay. Thank you.